If you would, go ahead if you have your scripture or have one within reach. Go ahead and find a Bible. Turn in the New Testament to the Gospel of Luke. When you find the Gospel of Luke, turn to the 9th chapter and find verse 18. Some of you may know about a year and a half ago, I went in and took a step to try to further my education a bit. A lot of people thought I was plenty smart enough as it was. So I did. And one of the things that they do in this particular program is they have week-long intensives. And so in July and in January, I spend a week in Denver. And there's assignments and stuff to do before and after, but there's a week-long intensive that's all day, every day for that week that kind of zeroes in on the particular study that we're doing. One of the things that I like is that they allow, they allow students to sometimes put together an independent study. So we can kind of follow after some of the things that we're interested to kind of dig in on. And I don't have to spend a week in a hotel in Denver. And so last summer I kind of went that route, and then I'm thinking this summer I may do the same. I've put together a basic proposal, and it's been approved, and that's all good. And I get to pick out, along whatever I kind of define, I get to pick out my own reading that can kind of contribute to that. And the study I'm looking at doing, I've been able to add some reading by a fella named Peter Drucker. I don't know if you've heard much of him. He's basically, he passed away probably maybe about 5 or 10 years ago. He was called the father of modern management. And so folks, whether it be in business, not-for-profit, or whatever, if they really have some roles in leadership, they're acquainted with Peter Drucker. His writings went global, and he was approached and engaged by all sorts of organizations and businesses, from IBM to Procter & Gamble, GE, Salvation Army, even Girl Scouts of America sought out his input and insight. So it was really, really quite a guy. And he's well regarded. And one of the books that I picked out to read was simply called The 5 Important Questions. And it's really kind of simple, but kind of straightforward stuff. But as I was reading through some of the reviews about this particular book, he was getting high praise. You know what I'm talking about, when you get a book and there's all these little endorsements and stuff about the book. And one of the folks who'd written a review or a commendation said, "Not even Socrates asks better questions than Peter Drucker." I thought, well, that's pretty high praise, you know. And then I paused for a bit because I was thinking about this passage for us today. And not to take anything away from Peter Drucker, not really to take anything away from Socrates, but I think Jesus asks some pretty good questions too. And what you have in Luke chapter 9, be about verse 18 or so, you have Jesus asking some questions, and they are pretty good questions. He asks 3 questions in this passage from 18 to 26. And what I'd like to do is just take a little bit of time and add this piece of the Mosaic. Luke, as we talked about as we've gone along, is kind of putting together this mosaic. He's using different pieces and he puts them together to present a little bit larger picture of Jesus. And so some of the things we've looked at is how Jesus introduced himself in terms of to the public eye. That's in Luke chapter 4. We also talked about and looked at how Jesus made invitations to folks who weren't exactly the church-going type. And that's part of the picture of Jesus. We saw Jesus get interrupted in a celebratory parade because they ran straight into a funeral processional. We also see Jesus praying. We also see Jesus giving some direction to his followers, and now we have Jesus asking some questions. So let's pick it up at verse 18, chapter 9. came about that while he, Jesus, was praying alone, the disciples were with him, and he questioned them. Now, that's kind of curious to me. It seems like the disciples are always coming up unto Jesus when he's praying. But usually they're coming to ask him a question, but it's like he beats them to the blow. Okay, so they come up, it's like, okay, here you are. Well, listen, I've got a question for you then. So he said, who do the multitudes, who do the crowds, who do the people say that I am? They answered and said, John the Baptist. Others say Elijah. Others, one of the prophets of old has risen again. And he said to them, but who do you say that I am? Peter answered and said, the Christ of God. And then Jesus cautioned them, and he instructed them not to tell this to anyone, and said to them, the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, the powers that be, if you will, and be killed, and be raised up on the third day. And he was saying to them, if anyone wishes to come after me, then let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses it, loses his life for my sake, is the one who will save it. For what is a man profited if he gains the whole world and loses or forfeits his soul? For if you're ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed when he comes in his glory, the glory of the Father and the angels. Interesting. Let's pray. Father, these are important questions and important words. I pray you'd open not just our hearts, but our minds as well. So we'll not only hear what Jesus asks, but we'll have a meaningful answer. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. The passage has three main questions. Two of them are pretty obvious. One is kind of embedded. But I thought we would just take a little bit of time today and look at the questions that Jesus asks, because they are very good questions. The first question that Jesus asks of the 12 is basically, what's the word on the street? What are people saying about me? And I find this interesting for about 2 or 3 reasons. If you're taking notes, here's some things you may want to jot down. First of all, I find this question interesting. The question and the answer I find interesting because it echoes the same thing we're told in chapter 9, verse 7. If you still have your Bibles open, you may want to check that. But the person asking the question in verse 7 is King Herod, the local ruler. And he wants to know the word on the street in regard to Jesus. Isn't that interesting? Anyone ever noticed that before? In Luke 9:7, Herod is asking the question, and his advisors come back with some saying John the Baptist, some saying Elijah. And now here in 9:18, it's not King Herod, it's Jesus who's asking, what's the word on the street in regard to me? And whoever the king's advisors were listening to, those are the same ones that apparently the disciples were listening to, because they come back with the same answer. He's a prophet. Come back. Is John the Baptist or Elijah? What's interesting to me about this is not only that you've got the same question getting the same answer among the population, I guess, but there's something that they don't answer about what people are saying. Because you see, the word in the synagogue wasn't the same thing as the word on the street. In the synagogue, you can check, I think it's in chapter 4, verse 28. They want to kill him. They take him apparently to throw him off of a cliff. I don't think that that's going to be anything flattering for them to be saying, yeah, he's a prophet, watch us kill him. I think they're going to say, this guy is a threat. This guy is stirring some things that we don't want to deal with, and we would just as soon have him eliminated. In 4:28, it actually says that they were in a rage and they tried to get him to the cliff's edge. That's kind of intense. And in 6:11 of Luke, we're told that they were the same folks at the synagogue are filled with rage. And the word rage there means rage to the point where they're not rational anymore. And it says in response, and their take on Jesus is they're looking to see what to do with him, which means how to eliminate him. So you see what's going on? The word on the street among the general guy on the street and the general population is Jesus is kind of complimentary. He's kind of a religious or spiritual heavyweight. He's up there with the big guys. But the word at the synagogue is he's a target. That's interesting to me. The other thing that's interesting about the first question is, I think it kind of parallels stuff for us. Hope he's all right. The powers that be in our day, I think they see Jesus as a target. Whether it be federal government, whether it be media, whether it be academia, Jesus is someone they do not want to deal with. We don't want his name spoken. He is a target that we want to eliminate. That's our world. And that's the truth. You don't have to look or read very far to see those signals and those messages very clear. So that's the word, if you will, among the powers that be. The word among the general population tends to be, oh, Jesus, yeah, he's a good guy. Yes, Jesus, he's a heavyweight. We'd put him right up there with Buddha. We'd put him right up there with Confucius. The first question is really important because we have to understand something. The powers that be get it wrong. Jesus is far more than just an inconvenience or a threat. He's more than a target. And I think the word on the street is good to know, but we need to understand too that they missed the mark too. Jesus is more than just another prophet. Here's my word for you on this question. It's good to know the word on the street because we know better how to do ministry then. Would you agree? But don't confuse things. The word on the street doesn't necessarily mean that it's true or that it's right or that it's good. We need to hear Jesus ask the first question, and that is the first question. What are people saying about me? When Jesus asks the question, the answers come. You're a prophet, John the Baptist, something like that. He gives no real reply to that. Instead, he moves on to the next question. So let's do that, shall we? Second question moves from what are people saying about me to what are you saying about me? And that's where the dynamics change. Anyone here familiar with the Johari scale of self-disclosure? Probably not. Okay. Johari scale of self-disclosure basically means that it's a whole lot easier and people are a lot more comfortable to report what other people are saying than to share what they think. We're a lot more comfortable to share what we're hearing other people say than to say what we think or feel about things. Generally speaking, that's the case. And what you see in this is the same thing. When Jesus asks, look at it very carefully. You're probably looking at verses 19 and 20 here. When Jesus says, what are people saying? What comes back? Do you see it? They answered, meaning probably all 12. Hey, here's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. This is what everyone else is saying. Here's the word on the street. And we're fully comfortable to report what other people are saying. But when he says, who do you say that I am? It doesn't say they answered. How many answered? 1. We went from 12 to 1. Why? Because it became personal. This isn't a general question anymore. It's a very personal question. And so when it comes time to reveal something about what we think or feel, what we say, we get a little less comfortable about that. That's what cracks me up in church work. Because sometimes people want to tell you something, but they don't want to be the one to tell you. Anyone know what I'm talking about? And so what do? Well, I hear people saying, okay, which means I'm kind of scared to reveal what I really think, so I'm going to report, okay? That's what's going on here. People sometimes are scared to say what they think. They're scared to share their own conviction. But Jesus makes it personal, and we see Peter step up, and he nails it in 2 ways. Number 1, he has the courage to say, this is what I think. Beyond reporting what everybody else is saying, Peter says, here's what I say. And in the end, Jesus is really interested in that. It's a point of curiosity what everybody else is saying, but what do you say? What do you say? What are you going to reveal and not just report? What's in your heart? What's in your mind? What do you say? That takes some courage. It really does. But beyond that he said something is what he said. And we kind of know, right? You're the Christ of God. And that's pretty impressive, pretty clear. But what we miss, and this is really important, what we miss is that Peter's answer connects back to chapter 4, verse 18, when Jesus introduces himself. 4:18, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me. The word anoint is Christ. He has Christed me. So when Peter says you're the Christ of God, he's saying, I believe you are who you say you are. I don't care what the word on the street is. I don't care what the word from the powers that be are. I don't care. I believe you are who you say you are. So when Jesus says, I have been anointed by God, I have been Christed by God. When Peter says you are the Christ of God, he's saying, I agree with you. I believe you, that you are who you say you are. I think every one of us have to come to that point. That's not just the question, it's an important question, but it's also an important answer. Do we simply go along with what everybody else is saying, or do we say, you know what? I don't believe them about you. I believe you about you. That's the second question. From the general question to the very personal question, and Peter shares not only insight but conviction. This is what I say. I believe you are who you say you are. We good with the second question? You follow me? First question is a very general question. What's the word on the street? Second question is very personal. Very personal. And Peter's answer is significant. Now, before we get to the third question, we have to kind of follow what Jesus is doing. If you still have your Bible open, you want to check this, because it says after Peter says this, Jesus cautions him. Now, when Matthew tells the story, Matthew kind of highlights how Jesus commends Peter. You know what I'm talking about? Blessed are you, because flesh and blood hadn't shown this to you, but you understand this because God's working in your life. That's Matthew. Luke goes to the caution. Luke says Jesus cautioned them. Because while they figured out who the anointed was, they didn't know what anointed meant. You follow me? They figured out who the anointed one was, Jesus, but they didn't know what anointed meant. They were pretty clouded on that. Anointed doesn't mean I'm going to subdue. I'm going to throw off the political powers that be and subdue. It doesn't mean I'm going to dominate. For Jesus, he was anointed to serve and suffer as a sacrifice. So Peter and the others are pretty cloudy about this, but for Jesus it's crystal clear. And he says that, if you have your scriptures open. He says, I'm anointed, this is what's going to be coming my way, fellas. I'm going to suffer, which means I'm going to be physically brutalized. I'm going to be rejected, which means I'm going to be publicly mocked and made a spectacle. I'm going to be killed, which means my life is going to be stripped from me in an awful and cruel way. And I'm going to be raised. Can we pause on that for a minute so we don't go over it too fast? Jesus is saying, the train is on the track and it's headed toward me. I'm going to be beaten. I'm going to be publicly humiliated. I'm going to have my life torn away from me in the most heartless and cruel way. And I'm going to be raised. He's not doing it for him. Think. This isn't just a little news update or bulletin. He's saying this train is on the tracks, and I'm standing on those tracks, and I'm going to stay on those tracks, but I'm not doing this for me. I'm not here to impress anybody. I'm doing it for you. We go over these things way too fast sometimes. And like we've said before, sometimes things that are so familiar, we stop seeing them. Think about what Jesus is saying. And then he says, so if you're going to follow me, you need to be clear about what it's about. And ultimately, the way I'm taking leads to life. For you, I will be raised, and you have a chance for life. But you need to know this. If you try to hoard your life and clutch it to yourself, you will lose it. If you lay it down and give it, you will find it. We run into these folks all the time. They're clutching everything to themselves. They're trying to hold on to their life. They're trying to hoard it to themselves. And you know what? They lose it. Their life gets wasted away. Those who begin to lay their life down for something, someone, who begin to give their life away, they find it. That's what Jesus is saying. And then we get to the third question. And this third question is rhetorical. We already know the answer to it, but here's the question. What does it get you? To gain everything and lose your soul. That part of you that's meant for God, that can connect to God, that part of you that's the truest you. Mark expands it when he talks about it, and he says, that's followed up with, because what are you going to give in exchange for your soul? Your investment portfolio? Think God's interested in that? Your retirement account? You think God's interested in that? Your toys? Trophies? Treasures? What's God going to be interested in with that? There is nothing you can give in exchange for the truest you. There's nothing you can give in exchange for your soul. That's the third question. The third question. What does it profit you to gain things and lose you? Nothing. For 5 years, I worked with kids who were in trouble, or kids who had trouble in them. Rough kids. But this was under the umbrella of the Methodist Church. This is back in Indiana, and so we had devotions. And I was at the anger management and mental health cottage, which was always an adventure because you never knew when a fight was going to break out over who gets to stand where and what piece of carpet do they get to occupy. But we would lead with devotions, and I thought, what do I need to talk to these kids about? And I, different times, talked about different things. One morning, though, I realized I needed to frame things for them. And I said, there will come a time where it's just you and God. That everything else has fallen away. There will come a time, listen, when it's just you and God. And everything else has fallen away. And He's going to look for two things. He's going to look for the blood of Jesus that has touched you. And He's going to look for what kind of soul you became because of it. That's all. That's all that's going to matter. And when it's just me before God and nothing else matters except the blood of Jesus and the soul I became because of how it touched me, that's all there is. And that's true for me. And it's true for the miscreant teenagers that I worked with. And you know what? It's true for you. There will come a time, and this is fresh in our minds, there will come a time when it's just you and just God, and all you have is the soul you've become. That's a profound question, isn't it? How we answer that question affects everything. Not just for this life, but forever. Peter Drucker asks good questions. If you're running a business, really good questions. Socrates asks some good questions as you're building a philosophy of life and how you see things. Jesus asks the questions that affect eternity. I think those are the best questions. So let's be those who are aware of what the world around us is saying about Jesus. But we also need to be those who will answer His question to us. Who do you say? And we need to live, I think, with the question of what would we give in exchange for our soul? As we enter Holy Week, let's remember the price He paid. He could reclaim our soul.